Welcome to the third season of Afros and Audio's Black History Month series, Heard. Today, my guest is Najmah Ahmad, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation, especially during Black History Month. Yeah, I think it's just a really timely space to have this conversation. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And this is our third season, as I mentioned, and it's so great to connect with folks within the community, podcasters who are doing their thing, creating their work. So we're going to jump right in because today is all about you. We're highlighting the Free Black Girl podcast.
Mhm.
So, what inspired you to create the Free Black Girl podcast, and how did you come to realize your story needed to be shared through this medium?
Yeah. So, funny enough, I just launched this podcast 6 months ago. In April of 2020, I was talking to a friend who had gone out on her own journey of entrepreneurship. I quit my own job 3 years ago and started my own economic justice and education consulting firm called the Chisholm Group, named after Shirley Chisholm. And so I have been doing that for 3 years and I loved it. And I was always talking to friends. All my friends are like, if you talk to Najma long enough, she's going to get you to quit your job. And so this particular friend, she had a lucrative career and we would talk when I quit my job and she was like, I could never do that. And so fast forward to April 2024, I was just talking to her and she had just quit her job and had gone out on her own. I was just talking to her about finding out what her passion was when she was going out and starting her business, because a lot of times when entrepreneurs are in that new space, it's I guess I'll just do what I was doing before because that paid the bills. But I would be like, do you love it? Because if you didn't love it, why are you going to keep doing that to yourself? And so I was just talking to her about that. She said something as we were getting off the phone. She was like, you need to start a podcast. She was like, every time I talk to you, I feel like I understand myself more. And I was like, oh man, thank you. I appreciate that. But at that time, I was like, I'm gonna start no podcast. I didn't even listen to podcasts. In my mind, the world of podcasts was not positive. It was like a bunch of people getting on the internet and just talking about stuff. But at that point, I was also doing coaching. So I coached Black women on how to quit their jobs and start their own businesses. And when I start with my coaching clients, one of the first things I tell them is you need to get a therapist. I'm not a therapist, I'm your coach. And being an entrepreneur is going to tap dance on all of your stuff, all of your insecurities, all of your, will they pay me enough? And so as I would tell my coaching clients that, they'd be like, okay. And then be like, but what does that even look like? What does that even mean? And I was like, oh, it's not enough just to tell people they need to heal. Those of us who have gone through these journeys need to share. That's the point of healing, is that as you heal from the darkness, you pick up a little bits of light. And our job is to leave kind of guideposts for other people to illuminate their own journeys. And so that's when the Free Black Girl was born, to really say, I guess I'm going to step out here and share how I got myself free.
That is so important. And thank you for sharing that journey. Everything you said, from the work that you were doing already to this extension, essentially, this is an extension of that. Now, more people get to hear about the work that you do and the experiences that you've had.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the goal is.
Right.
One thing to tell people what to do,
Mm-hmm.
it's another thing to lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both coaches. I resonate with you completely on that. And I've considered myself the Harriet Tubman of moving from spaces that you no longer want to be in. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody needs to quit their job. Jobs are necessary, functions
Mm-hmm.
inside of our society. We need them. We need
Right.
doctors, lawyers,
Right.
teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
need people who are able to work and be in those spaces. But we also need folks who don't want to be there at all
Mm-hmm.
to find their liberation, to find
Right.
what's going to allow them to live and be freer. So I resonate with that completely and
Mm-hmm.
much respect for that.
Thank
So
you.
your podcast blends themes of self-discovery, inner child healing, and empowerment. How do these things reflect your own personal journey?
And just real quick too, when you were talking about we need workers, we do need those doctors and lawyers, but I also want them to operate from a liberated space, right?
Absolutely.
Just because you're in these systems does not mean that they own you. And so that's a part of the podcast too. But to answer your question around inner child healing, self-discovery and liberations, when starting this podcast, I wanted to think about what was the best way to share my story that wasn't just like me up here when I was 7 and this and that happened. But I have been working with a somatic healer for the past going on 6 years, somatic therapist. And somatic healing is really exploring the mind body connection, understanding that 70% of what we do is subconscious, that we're not even aware of the things that are running in the background, the scripts that we play that we don't even know that we signed up for and that impact us in our everyday experiences. And so when I was working on my own healing, and this is where the inner child piece comes in. I did realize some of the things that were causing me the most angst were reflections of things that had happened in my childhood. My mother passed when I was 13. I grew up Muslim. And so that shaped the way that I felt about modesty and how I show up in the world and what religion does to all of us and what we think is right and wrong on who I was and my identity because of these traumas in childhood that I didn't even get a chance to explore. I didn't even
Mhm.
get a chance to be like, what do you like outside of sexuality, just in general in life? What do you like? Do you like this? Or did somebody tell you that you're supposed to like this? When I was thinking about my work, I had a huge achievement addiction. It was like, if I could just achieve, then I'll feel whole. If I can just be perfect, then I don't know what I thought was going to happen, right? Like just magically, I would just be happy. I got to these pinnacles of success in my career and I was just like, I'm still not fulfilled. And so that is what I share is how did I get from that point of not being fulfilled to saying, oh, I need to go heal. I really need to dig in to why, what is it? Actually, I talk about it in the first episode, the show Insecure really saved my life because that was the first time that I saw Black women my age in the second season, Molly. She went to therapy and so that's what I wanted to do with this podcast in a sense. Let's pull the veil back on the healing. We talk about love and light and all that stuff. But no, for real, this is not cute. This is hard work, but it's worth it. But people need to know what does it actually look like when you're talking about self-discovery and inner child healing. That was a bit of my own journey when I got to that point because it was at this kind of nexus where I was walking down the street and I was like, I don't want to be here anymore, leaving my job. But it scared me because I was like, I don't know if I was talking about I didn't want to be at my job anymore or I just didn't want to be here. And I was like, oh, I got to go talk to somebody that said, oh, I can go find a Black woman therapist who can help me work through some of this
Mhm.
dissatisfaction that I'm feeling.
You're so right about these socialized beliefs, these learned behaviors that we don't even know exist within us. And then maybe we do and we continue to choose them. But a part of this socialization is being repressed, oppressed, and suppressed.
Mm,
And it rules the day.
yeah.
And we just continue in motion, not knowing that we are living an existence of shoulds and supposed to and belonging to others, everyone but ourselves.
Mhm.
And it's so important to be disruptors, right? Because I get it. It's not about shame or guilt or I should know better. How does a socialized people know better
Right.
unless they're disrupted and
Mhm.
intentional about getting free? You can't do that without the first spark, right? You're just doing what you do. I appreciate that so much about what you're doing. And your podcast name is so appropriate. And that shows how intentional you are about the messaging and wanting what you want for yourself, for others.
Yeah.
That's what podcasting is all about. That's what these
Mm.
shared stories is really all about. So I really appreciate that
Thank
about the
you.
work that you're doing. How do you balance your roles as an advocate for economic justice and an educator with being a podcast creator?
So I came to the point towards the end of 2024 where I was feeling pulled more towards the content creating space. When I was consulting, again, which I love and I think is very important, economic justice is still a thread in my work. And I'll talk about that. And education, of course, is still a thread in my work. But with the consulting, honestly, I was telling a friend because I've decided to leave the consulting world and do this content creating full time. A lot of people are like, because my consulting is pretty successful. I had large scale clients. I'm working all across the country, helping cities to redesign the way that they support young people and their paths to the future. But what I was finding was that I was coaching Black women and asking them, as they're looking at their niche, what brings you joy that solves a problem for other people that you're good at that they'll pay you for? And so when I'm asking people this over and over again, eventually I had to ask myself that. And I was like, is this still bringing you joy? Is this really what you want to be doing right now? Because in this country, as we know, education, the economic systems are essentially collapsing in front of our eyes. And I was in these spaces. I was telling someone I wasn't on the plantation anymore, but it felt like sharecropping a little bit. Like I had that proximity. And so I'm in these conference rooms and I'm helping people do a strategic plan. And as I'm doing this other work on healing, I'm just looking like, you're dysregulated. We're sitting here arguing over words to go in a mission statement. And I'm trying to free communities and help young people get opportunities that's going to change their generational trajectories. So it's becoming unfulfilling. I was using all of this creative energy to help my clients, but it wasn't being fulfilled. I wasn't seeing it come to fruition. So when I started to do the podcast, I got to see the immediate reaction from people, what they were taking from it, how it was impacting their lives. I've had people reach out to me and tell me, I see myself differently. I was struggling with this concept of compassion for my partner, but now I see them differently. And I'm like, how powerful is that? And so I've been doing a lot of ancestral healing work. I have some episodes around that as well. And it just felt like the ancestors was like, girl, what you doing? Come on. Like, you need to be over here. You need to be directing your energy to what you are being called to do and to surrender. It's scary, right? I was making money and I was like, oh, how to make money? But it's going to come. And I know that. But in the sense of how I still am having that thread of the economic justice piece and the education piece, I'm not sunsetting or stopping my consulting firm altogether. An arm of my consulting firm was my coaching. And so last year, I actually expanded my one on one coaching and created the Unbought and Unbossed Academy. And
Mm,
so that is word to Shirley Chisholm, of course, but it's an academy for Black women, everybody that comes on board. I have a mission now that I just announced that I want to help 100 Black women to quit their jobs and start their own businesses over the next 3 years. And so I just launched a merch line. Definitely check that out to help to fund that. But every person in that academy, they'll get access to a financial therapist to really start to unpack money trauma. We'll help them to understand where their fears are and how that is impacting their decision to leave and go out on their own. Also helping them to find their mission, their vision, their values, what brings them joy, to identify what their services could be and really get creative. Then they get access to a larger network of Black women entrepreneurs and helping them to access capital. They get a website as well. So I have a web designer on the team too. And so that is where I wanted to shift out of trying to impact and move these systems that are not designed to foster Black wealth and really think about how can I do this in a different way. And so the
mhm.
podcast is one way to be like, all right, y'all, in order for us to get where we need to be, we got to heal first. I think about Gil Scott Heron, the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live because the revolution is within us.
Mm.
We have to be like, all right, what the hell, what is going on? And heal that so that then we can be in community together and then heal collectively.
Yeah, and what's so important is that holistic aspect of it. A lot of times, programs, coaching programs, healing, people will get focused on, I need to heal this aspect of it. And there's surface level healing, right? The things that you know, vulnerability to others and all that sort of thing. But you gotta get vulnerable with yourself first.
Yes.
You gotta tell your own self the truth, right? I believe that our realities are a cornerstone where everything else can get built. But we gotta be able to and willing to be real
Mm-hmm.
about those challenges, those things that are no longer serving us, supporting us. They ain't gonna challenge us to be any more than we are in this moment. So it's so important, these holistic opportunities to heal and move forward. And I really respect that part of your work and recognize that something is no longer working for me.
Mhm.
So what do I get to do differently? And you are doing that. So kudos to you for that. I really love that. You mentioned that you have a most watched episode and you were afraid to create it. So I want to hear about that because there are a lot of creators, content creators, and let's face it, podcasters are content creators.
Mhm.
Tell the story about that behind that episode and what it taught you about vulnerability, speaking up, and courage.
Yeah. Oof. So this whole first season was really me taking the listeners on my own journey of, like I said, how I got free. And so I started off with how I freed my mind, freed body, freed spirit, talked about the ancestors connection, and this one episode around freed love. And so I wanted to talk about sexuality and how I came out to myself when I was 37 years old, and
Mm,
then to my family, and then to the world last year. And as I was wanting to put this episode together, I was like, all right, I'm going to talk about this. These people are already in my business. And now I'm notoriously a private person. So a lot of people in my life I know are like, who is this person? What is even going on anymore? I was just thinking about this episode and I was like, how do I do this in a way that I'm telling my story, it's authentic, but it's in a way that it's going to be useful. Like, what? She's gay now? And that was all my own stuff that in the
mhm,
background that
absolutely.
plays.
Mhm,
Nobody's probably even thinking about that. But little me is feeling that still. And so
mhm,
little me was having a fit. She was like, you're about to do what? You're about to go tell the world our most like intimate details. And so I think each episode gave me a little bit more strength. Each episode, when I revealed just a little bit more about myself, how I thought, what I believed, it gave me that fortitude to be like, you can do, you've done it. You've done this 5 times already with all these other episodes. This is just another topic. I actually got introduced to who the guest was on the episode. And so it's a Black woman therapist who specializes in working with people who've come out later in life, and
mm,
she herself actually came out later in life. So it was just such a beautiful, powerful conversation about who are we? The episode is called Freed Identity. Who do you love? Are you for sure? And so it really goes into what we've been told about what we love, who we love, and how do we even know? And in the broader sense, outside of sexuality, when we think about gender roles, even in heterosexual relationships, why are we playing these roles? A lot of times people are unfulfilled. I talked about how I even have so much more compassion for men because I'm like, that has to be severely limiting to a lot of men to feel like their only value is paying for things and fighting off an attacker. So it ended up being a more broad conversation that we are all being hurt by patriarchy, regardless of your sexuality. We're all being hurt by these boxes that we don't even place ourselves in, that we've been placed in because
mhm.
of fear of being who you really are. And just how sad that is when you really think about it. Like you're afraid to be who you really are because we're trying to fit into some box of one expression of an identity, and that is so limiting to believe that we were all supposed to be one way. I breathed a lot. I did some meditation and just I surrendered to it and was like, this is going to help so many people, and it is still the most watched episode so far.
Oh man, that is so incredible. It wouldn't be the Free Black Girl podcast without that episode.
Yeah, it
In
wouldn't.
a lot of ways, because you'd still be somehow, some way holding back
Yeah.
and not expressing yourself as fully as you
Mhm.
can. And we get to bring our whole selves to anything that we put our mind to, anything we approach. Thank you for doing that, for finding the courage for doing that and for putting it out there because there's some people who have created those type of episodes and they're still sitting on their hard drive.
Yeah. Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
still afraid, and that's my philosophy. Sometimes we are simply unwilling.
Mhm.
We have an aversion to freedom that we don't even understand.
Yeah.
And so, being willing to go there and, put yourself out there because it is a freedom for someone else.
Mhm.
Um, It's not about us in a lot of ways. It's for someone else to be able to come out of the shadows. And kudos. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank
doing that work. I'm right with you as far as you can tell a repressed human
you.
because they're judging and distracted by so many
Mm,
other people
mhm.
that they're
Yes.
not working on their own sense of freedom and healing. And if I did it and I'm black and I'm a man, then guess who does it? A black man.
Mhm, mhm. I
So,
love that. For
yeah,
sure, for sure.
yeah, for sure. So, what would you consider your biggest podcast win to date, and what made it so meaningful for you?
My biggest win. I think the fact that I didn't even know how to start a podcast. I literally Google how to start a podcast, right?
Mhm,
This was, like I said, in April of 2024. So I started Googling and then I went on YouTube and I watched some YouTube videos and I was like, okay, understanding best practices. And then I signed up for some Udemy
mhm,
classes. Like, what equipment do I need? How do I upload this stuff? Downloaded stuff in my head, and I was like writing out scripts. I'm like, girl, you don't have to sit up here and read this script. So just be you, just be natural. And so
mhm.
seeing myself evolve, I'm not the same person as I was in April of last year. And that's so amazing. And I'm so proud of myself for believing that I was capable of this. And I'm pretty good at it. I was like, okay. Like, I actually listened to my own episodes back multiple times. I was like, man, that was good. So, really just taking the first step and getting
Mhm.
started and really moving past that. I don't do this, right? That's not me.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. Like these stories that we tell ourselves, I've told myself my whole life I'm an introvert. But when I encounter other people, they're like, are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not like uh can't carry on a conversation. I just recharge by being by myself. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was just really proud that I decided to take that first step and that it continued to grow. I didn't drop the first episode until August of 2024. I launched my Instagram page for the podcast. And then by December, 2,200 followers on Instagram, pretty engaged. I launched my merch store. I created all the designs. I didn't even know I could do that. So just allowing myself
Yeah.
to surprise me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my philosophies is I am beliefs are 100% inventive
Mhm,
and creative.
mhm.
We get to create, recreate, claim, reclaim every day, every moment. And
Yeah,
it's the evolution of understanding self and stepping out, stretching yourself
yeah,
because you will not know
yeah,
until you make that first step.
yep,
And so it's so important. And I love that we are having this conversation because podcasters aren't just podcasters, content
mhm,
creators aren't just content creators. We are people
yeah,
first. And so being able to share these experiences with others allows us to become possibility.
mm,
And we've talked about liberation and how important and central to your podcast. And you talked about ancestry. So, how have those central themes really supported you? Because let's face it, it supports us
yeah.
in moving forward. But what else about those central themes would you like for people to really take away?
Look around me, right? Look above me. I got Toni Morrison on one shoulder, and I have James Baldwin, and I have the
Mhm,
Black Panthers above me. I have no choice but to speak truth to power. My whole house is an altar, right? Like I have Fred Hampton over there on one wall. I have Shirley Chisholm on one wall. I have an actual altar with my ancestors. But I think the thing that I would say, I feel like right now the ancestors are calling to us. We look around in this country and in this world, things are shifting. We're in this space of either you're going to surrender and flow with it or you're going to get dragged. And I prefer to flow, right? Right? And the ancestors happen to be our life raft to help us in this flow. Our grandparents, our grandmas, great grandmas, great grandfathers want us to stop being scared of them. This was all weird woo woo to me, probably like 2 or 3 years ago. I told myself that it was weird and woo woo. I was afraid of how I would be perceived
mhm, mhm.
if I actually said out loud that I believed in these things. In the general sense, the ancestors are always looking down on us, right? Those things that we say or that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams have become catchphrases. when they
Mhm.
are reality. This podcast, I probably have an ancestor who wanted to be on stage. I started tap dancing lessons and I was laughing. I was like, which one of my ancestors wanted to tap dance? And it dropped into me and it was like, oh, all of these ideas, these passions that pop into our head that we avoid or we don't make space for. What if we knew that was an unrealized, an unlived dream of an ancestor? Would you pursue it then? If you knew that you had folks on the other side, we just lost Nikki Giovanni recently. She's a soror of mine. I'm a Delta, and I've loved her for a long time. And there's a clip of her that I love, and she's talking about you have to know who wanted you to live. You have to know who wants you to win, who's supporting you. She said she can go any place and talk about slavery. She can do anything because she knew that her grandmother was always with her, that her grandmother's friends always wanted her to win. And so tapping into your ancestors, understanding those gifts, not just the traumas, because we talk about ancestral healing, which is very important. But as we heal, we also heal our ancestors. When we live these dreams that they couldn't live, we're healing their memories. When we say their names, we heal them. When I talk about my grandmother, Willa Mae, in one of my episodes, we keep those memories alive. My grandmother was also a conjure woman. And so there's all these things that I'm learning about them, about the power of manifestation, about the power of spirituality that is living on in me. And so it's just such a richness to life
Mhm,
that has
mhm.
been injected from their memory. Even before this episode, I go and I say a prayer and I tell them to use me and to speak through me. And whatever they want people to hear, allow it to come and to flow. And the energy between us, right? That's the ancestors. That's it.
Oh,
We just
yeah.
met one time, right? And so that's why we met, is because the ancestors was like, hey, y'all got to talk. Y'all got something that y'all need to tell the people. And so that's what I want people to really think about. Like, why are you afraid? Who told you to be afraid?
Yeah.
Colonization, right?
Yeah, and if more people knew that, other people's liberation is connected to ours, how would that change the way in which we move and how we speak? And not just the departed, but also the living. Our liberation is connected to so many others. It's up to us to get free.
Yeah, that's
If
it.
we if we're beginning to get those downloads, I always say we are born in a tunnel of this education, the socialized beliefs, these constructed ways of being. And once those cracks start appearing, don't retreat. Start throwing rocks at those cracks so you can break
Yes,
it open
keep
more
pushing.
and move towards that light because it's so important for us as individuals, but also as a collective. And wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
All right. So, what role, you've spoken about this a bit, what role does storytelling play in
Mm.
this healing and empowerment process for Black women and marginalized communities?
Belonging and the power of being seen. We move through this world so much. I moved through this world feeling like I didn't belong, feeling like I wasn't truly seen. And it was because I wasn't allowing myself to be seen, because I didn't feel safe to be seen, because I didn't see stories like me. I talk about in the episode around sexuality and identity, I don't think I had even seen two Black women in a relationship, like in a movie, or read a book about it, like in a positive or in a deep way. Like you got Set It Off, Queen Latifah had a girlfriend, but they were like robbing banks and things like that. But it just wasn't something that I even knew that was possible. So storytelling really illuminating possibilities. I even think about this month, in February, I'm launching my new line called Remembering Our Teachers. When we talk about the ancestors, we talk about James Baldwin and Shirley Chisholm and Toni Morrison. They have left us the blueprint in their stories. We just had an inauguration. We have this new administration coming in. In America, there's a lot of fear about what's next. There's a lot of forgetting of the power that we have. There's an
Mm.
intentional blocking of these stories.
Deliberate.
And it's deliberate, right? And you have to ask yourself, why are they trying so hard to keep this from us? I wanted to create this line, Remember Our Teachers, because the wealth is there. We just have to open it. We just have to remember the stories. We just have to read it. They've been here. You don't think our ancestors faced, not to minimize what people are going through right now, but our ancestors weren't even treated as full human beings. And they
Mhm.
were still coming out of enslavement and thriving. How did they do that?
Yeah,
And if we don't connect to
absolutely.
our ancestors, we're missing. They were building universities. They
Mhm.
created Black Wall Street, and people were trying to murder them. We're over here, and again, not to minimize, but they're trying to ban TikTok, and yeah, that sucks. But we've come through and thrived in even more perilous situations.
Yeah.
So that is the power of storytelling, is that remembrance, it is being seen, it is belonging, but it's also the blueprint that we need to continue to thrive and pick up the baton.
Mhm.
Right now, the baton is just floating. And so
Yeah,
we got to remember those stories so we can pick it up.
absolutely. I remember watching a documentary on, Tulsa massacre, and it was a gentleman on there, older man, and I think he was a child of that. And he said, I wonder always what my life would have been like without the shroud and the cloud of oppression and segregation. Like, who could I have been? What could I have done?
Yeah.
And that is our opportunity
Mhm.
in this moment, and to squander it, to not believe that is our opportunity, is the work, right?
Yeah.
Again, understandable. We have been socialized and brought up in a way that is so deliberate and intentional in suppressing who we are, that it's understandable, but it is our job to get free, right? It's our
Mhm.
duty, as Nina Simone said, for the
Yeah.
artists. I want to get practical a little bit. We're talking about the story, and this is what this is about. This is about getting to know the person, right?
Mhm.
The work that we're doing, not just about podcasting. That's the medium that we're doing this on.
Right.
And you have a podcast. So,
Mhm.
duh.
Yeah.
But we're people first. And I want to know some of the things. You're simply starting out with this podcast,
Mhm.
which is beautiful, and you're learned, right? A lot of people, we don't understand that some of our, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, when we don't know what to do, we don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
So you learned, you
Mhm.
took some time to say, okay, what do I need to learn? What do I want to understand about this as I approach it? Talk a little bit about that approach to editing and producing the Free Black Girl to maintain its authenticity and message.
So, something you just said I wanted to touch on real quick.
Please, please, please.
So you mentioned neurotypical and neurodivergent. I just want to throw this out there. Who is the typical? Maybe we're trying to force ourselves to operate in a way that is not natural to human beings.
Absolutely.
That and then also when you talk about like when I don't know everything, I don't do anything. So I have this kind of metaphor that I use. Is our brains are like a video game map. So you beat one boss and you get a little bit of the map, but you can't see the whole map. But you got to keep going. And as you go, you take a step forward and the path unfolds. And so that is a part of the work, but it's scary because our brains grasp for information. We talk about
Mhm.
somatic healing on my podcast, right? And so we talk about neural pathways. Hard because you have to actually do the work intentionally to be able to be present enough and then allow yourself to surrender to that path unfolding. And so I just wanted to throw those two kind of concepts out there for
Yeah,
the
I
listeners.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. And
Mhm.
and speaking of Mario Kart, if
Yeah.
anybody that remembers back in the day, I haven't played it in 10 years. So I don't know if it's there now, but I used to go around and you beat that board or what have you. And then the next time you did it, there was like a ghost cart behind you
Yeah.
that followed you
Oh,
as you went
yeah.
back around the other
Mm,
track. And that's the intention, right? As we
mm.
are building new neural paths and this roadmap for ourselves, we're still wanting to cling to the
Yes,
perception of others and
yes,
the constructs that we have fit in. But it's up to us to outrun that ghost
yes, yes. Or even
each
to
time.
see the ghost and integrate
Yes,
it. Be like, "Come
yes,
here, I got
yeah,
you now."
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
love that.
yeah, yeah.
Again, we're gonna have a lot more conversation
I
there.
know. Imma ask you a question though. Imma answer. So you asked me like how I maintain
Mhm.
authenticity when I started the podcast. I was watching all these videos. How do I edit? How do I market? How do I was like, you focus on creating good content
Yeah,
and then figure the rest out later. And so that's literally what I did. I created the
there you
whole
go.
season. And then I got to the end of the season and it was funny because as I was creating it and when I told myself, just relax, you'll figure it out. I went on a hike. It was a Black women hike. And I was sitting there, I'm just talking to folks and I'm sitting across from someone and we're just chatting. She's like, "Oh, I do marketing." I just started laughing. I was like, "Okay." So I kept her in my brain. And then fast forward to the end of last year, I hit her up and now she's revamping my whole brand. So Giselle Artistry, shout out to her. I wanted someone, a Black woman preferably, who could really understand my brand, what I was trying to get across. But I wanted to not focus so much on that in the creating, because I feel like if you're so focused on how people are going to perceive your art, then you're off track. Let me just get it out. Let me get
Mhm.
out what I want to say, not any trends or anything like that, because I want this to be evergreen content. I want people 20 years from now to come across my podcast and it still resonates. But now I'm in this space of, all right, let's make it pretty. Let's make it pop. Let's make people come and watch and come and listen to it. But I wanted it to do it in that order on
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah, and the how will stop you before you even start. It's not how it turns out, it's that it turns out, that you are
Yeah.
in the work and you are, creating and building because you will grow as you go,
Mhm.
but you
Mhm.
gotta be off the sidelines.
Yeah. Because if I didn't get started, I wouldn't have met her. So it's as you keep moving forward, the people that you need, as we will, I'm sure we'll talk about, even meeting you, like the people that you need, you just have to keep going and moving forward. And what you need, that's the ancestors, right? That's abundance. I
Absolutely.
have a whole episode on abundance, is understanding that you always have what you need
Mhm,
and truly believing that will be true. Actually, my therapist corrected this for me recently. She said, it's actually believing that you are everything that you need,
mhm.
and that will always be true.
Absolutely, yeah, if you were meant to be anyone different, you would have been born that way. So you're right.
Mhm.
I just affirm and I'm aligned with that. And another philosophy alert. As you
Yeah.
manifest your vision will absolutely manifest you. You
Mhm.
got to get started. And you don't know the people you're going to meet and the opportunities that are going to come. We can only see
Mhm.
ourselves as far as we see and have experienced in that moment. That unfolding is real. That
Yeah.
unfolding is so real. I love that you brought that up. How can folks support you? You mentioned the merch, doing the academy and all of that. What are ways in which you are looking right now for support?
Yes, thank you. Watch the podcast, listen to the podcast. That's support for me, but it's really support for you. I talk to so many people and they tell me what they're going through. I'm like, please go watch. It's going to help you so much. Make me happy in that way. Just go watch it. But then, yes, I have this merch line. And again, the intention behind it really fund this work, this academy, to help these 100 Black women over the next 3 years to really understand their vision, understand their passion, to get free in that way. And as we know, I really feel like each one of those women have the power to transform their communities. I'm just one person and I've been able to do this and I'm able to touch so many people. So if I can help another 100 women to do the same, like the exponential increase of that is just going to be trajectory changing for so many communities. So definitely go to the freeblackgirl.com, check out the merch line. And if you are interested in getting some deeper support, if you are already on your entrepreneurial journey, you can also reach out to me and I can support in that way too. But I would say those are the main things. Listen to the podcast, check out the store, follow me on Instagram, really just trying to build this community. And I'll be thinking of other ways to start taking these communities offline and in
Mhm.
person. I really want more in person opportunity. The internet is so fickle, and these social media platforms are so fickle. So, signing up for my email list, I'll likely be getting a Patreon going soon. So, just stay connected and really tap in.
Okay. And one question I have just off the cuff, you were working with Black women. I know
Yeah,
that that work goes beyond and
yeah,
expands,
yeah,
especially the fact that anyone in this Black woman's life, from her children to her
yes.
partner to parents,
Mhm.
friends, there's a ripple effect. Talk about that just
Yeah,
really briefly about the fact that, yes, your demographic, your audience are
yeah,
Black women,
yeah.
but how does the work expand beyond?
It reflects me, right? The things that I talk about is from my perspective, but it's for everyone. I've had so many men reach out that have listened to my podcast and have thanked me because it has allowed them to understand how they can be more vulnerable as well, for themselves. I talk about it a lot in the Freed Identity podcast. We're talking all about relationships, also talking about understanding the things that men struggle with and those scripts that they have to play and how it impacts them and their health. When we talk about, I don't even think a lot of men know this, but that men also go through hormonal changes, because we're talking about perimenopause. And I had a doctor on talking about how this affects all of us. It affects your
Mhm,
mood, it affects
mhm, mhm.
if you're feeling angry, you're frustrated. And this podcast is for everybody. It's called The Free Black Girl, but it's really about anybody who is interested in healing, maybe not knowing where to begin, who's on their healing journey and wanting to find community. So think about the little free Black boy in you, the free non-binary individual in you. Like, it doesn't matter. If you are about liberation, if you are about community, if you are about being the best version of yourself, just allowing yourself to, I really asked myself, what would it feel like to step into the light on purpose? To just
Mhm.
allow yourself to be light, to allow yourself to put down all this stuff. Bag lady, right? What would it really feel like for you? And
Mhm.
so that's for everybody. That's universal. That
Absolutely.
doesn't have a gender or a gender expression on it. So thank you for asking me that. This is definitely a universal space for everybody.
Mhm. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
This has been
you.
a great
Yes.
conversation. I'm gonna ask you one more question,
Yes.
and then I'm gonna get you to tell folks
Mhm.
again, repeat the website and social media. You attended the Afros and Audio Podcast
Yes.
Festival this
Oh,
year. What was
mhm.
your experience? Tell me a little bit about how that experience impacted you.
I was blown away by the intentionality, especially of both of the locations. So I went to the community space, Motor
Mhm.
House in Baltimore. I was just talking to some of the owners there, and they were saying it's a real community space
Mhm.
for artists and creatives, and you could just feel it in the room. But then also at the museum, there happened to be that exhibit. I don't know if that's a newer exhibit, I think, or
It
it's not
is.
there all.
They change
Yeah,
it all the time.
the exhibit was basically about the history of Black people in media. So you walk in and like you're seeing Ida B. Wells, and it's just, I felt the spirit of the ancestors. Oh, okay. This is where I'm supposed to be. But I was so grateful. It was so affirming. A lot of the sessions, a lot of the things I had already done and figured out on my own. And I was like, oh, I thought I was just making up stuff. So that was beautiful. But then, even beyond that, learning so much that I didn't know before, and then making connections. I was able to meet so many people. I met you, and so happy now that means that I am here on this podcast. Other podcasters that I've met, we've been sending each other things, and I've gotten other invites to be on their podcast as well. So just knowing, I didn't know that this community was here. I don't even know how I found it. I just, the ancestors dropped it to me and were like, go here, girl. And I'm in DC, so it was literally up the road. It was a beautiful opportunity to be in that community. Kudos to you for creating it. Your vulnerability and telling your story was affirming, and I knew that it was an aligned space. I can't wait to go back again and again. I will be there every year.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, everybody, if you are in this space and you are about, that was something else actually that I appreciated. Again, there are varying types of podcasts. I really appreciated that it felt like everyone there was really about conscious content creation. Not that everything had to be super deep,
Mhm.
but that it was for the betterment. Either it was joy, bringing lighthearted fun, those are also for the betterment, but it wasn't like that toxicity in the air. I really appreciated seeing that as well.
It's very intentional, and it's always great to hear from people who get that and then are committed to contributing to spaces. You showing up,
Mhm.
meeting you on Friday night. I knew that you were in the right place, and I was too.
Yeah.
So it's really great. I'm thankful and grateful that you chose to show up for yourself and for others, because that's what we do when we enter into spaces
Mm.
like Afros and Audio. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Uh, please tell people where they can find you and how they can stay connected.
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to freedblackgirl.com. That's FREED, freedblackgirl.com. And I named it Freed because I wanted it to be an action.
Mhm.
We talk about I'm free. Okay, but how'd you get there? And so I talk about I freed myself. So it's the freedblackgirl.com. The podcast is on there, the merch store is on there. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel on there. You can follow me on Instagram on there. The website is the best place to go. And it's the Freed Black Girl podcast on Instagram. Free Black Girl Podcast on all podcast platforms. You can find me everywhere. And on YouTube, we do have the visual versions of the episodes as well.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Najma. I can't wait
Thank you.
to
Thank
get off this
you.
call and go down the rabbit hole of all
Thank
things
you.
Freed Black Girl podcast. And I really look forward to continuing to build with you in whatever way that looks, because it's important. We're doing important work, and I can acknowledge that about myself, and I definitely can see it in you. So thank you. Thank you for entering the space and
Thank
whatever
you.
we can do to make sure that you stay here. That's what we're here for. All right.
I appreciate you. Happy Black History Month, everybody.